Welcome heroes. This is the first video of a special trilogy dedicated to exploring the 12 prophecies of Apollo, one of the most enigmatic and influential gods in Greek mythology. Throughout this journey, we will unravel the divine messages Apollo delivered to mortals, revealing how his prophecies shaped myths, heroes, and destinies. Get ready for a deep dive into the words that challenged the most powerful kings, heroes, and ancient cities. In this video, we begin our trilogy by exploring the first prophecies, and as we move forward, each revelation will become even more fascinating and impactful. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the upcoming chapters of this divine journey. Let's get started. The 12 prophecies of Apollo, mysteries, destinies, and the god's role in Greek mythology. Apollo, one of the most complex and revered deities in Greek mythology, was not only the god of light, music, and healing, but also the one who carried the gift of prophecy. His oracles shaped the destinies of kings, heroes, and entire civilizations, symbolizing both the clarity and the dangers of knowledge. In this video, we will dive deep into 12 of Apollo's most emblematic prophecies, analyzing their impact on Greek myths and culture. 1. The foundation of Delphi and the Oracle of Pythia, the spiritual center of the Greek world. Apollo, the god of light and prophecy, chose Delphi as the place to establish his sanctuary, transforming it into the most important spiritual center of ancient Greece. However, before Delphi became the navel of the world, the site was guarded by a powerful and terrifying serpent called Python, daughter of Gaia. The battle with Python was a monstrous creature, associated with chaos and the primal force of the earth. She lived near a sacred spring at Delphi and was feared by both men and gods. Apollo, in search of a place to transmit his light and knowledge to the world, faced the serpent in an epic battle. With his accurate arrows, crafted by Hephaestus, he killed Python and freed the site, purifying it of the creature's presence. After defeating Python, Apollo performed an act of atonement. Despite being a god, he knew that spilling the blood of a divine creature had consequences. Therefore, he underwent a purification ritual to purge the guilt from the murder, reinforcing his role as a god who respected divine laws and cosmic order. This act elevated Delphi to a space of harmony between the human and divine realms, and Apollo declared it as his sacred sanctuary. The Oracle of Pythia with Delphi established, Apollo created his oracle, which would be accessed by mortals through Pythia, a priestess chosen to channel the voice of the god. Pythia was typically an older woman, considered pure and devoted to divine service. The prophecy process. Pythia sat on a tripod, a special chair placed over a fissure in the ground of Delphi, from which intoxicating vapors emanated, which the Greeks believed to be the breath of the earth, or Gaia. Entering a trance, she would utter mysterious words, which were then interpreted by Apollo's priests and delivered to the seekers. The ambiguity of the messages. Apollo's answers, conveyed by Pythia, were famous for their ambiguity. This reflected the complexity of divine knowledge, which often depended on human interpretation. A notable example was the prophecy given to Croesus, king of Lydia: "If you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire." Croesus thought it meant the enemy empire, but it turned out to be his own, showing that prophecies could serve as both a guide and a warning. The significance of Delphi. Delphi was known by the Greeks as Omphalos, or the navel of the world, because it was believed to be the point where heaven and earth met. This meaning transcended the myth. Delphi became a place where people from all over the Greek world, ranging from ordinary citizens to kings and generals, came to seek divine guidance. Political and military influence. Delphi became a central piece in Greek politics. Before important battles, naval expeditions, or the founding of new colonies, leaders consulted Apollo to secure divine favor. During the colonization of Magna Graecia, Delphi was crucial in guiding colonists to the ideal locations, reinforcing Apollo's role as a guide of Greek destiny. Religious and cultural impact. In addition to its political role, Delphi was also a hub for religious festivals. The Pythian Games, held in honor of Apollo, combined athletic competitions, music, and poetry, showing how Delphi united culture and spirituality. Apollo's centrality in Delphi. The establishment of Delphi as a spiritual center highlights Apollo's dual nature. He is the god who illuminates and guides, but also one who tests human limits through enigmatic messages. Delphi was not just a sacred location but a symbol of how divine knowledge shaped life in ancient Greece, offering both hope and challenges. At Delphi, Apollo transcended the role of a common Olympian god and became a universal mediator, connecting the human world to the cosmos. 2. Cassandra, the prophetess condemned to be unheard. Cassandra is one of the most tragic figures in Greek mythology, embodying the paradox of ignored truth. Daughter of King Priam and Queen Hecuba, rulers of Troy, Cassandra possessed remarkable beauty and a brilliant mind. It was this combination of attributes that caught the attention of Apollo, the god of prophecy, poetry, and music. Enchanted by Cassandra, Apollo decided to offer her an unparalleled gift, the ability to foresee the future with absolute clarity. The gift of prophecy and Apollo's curse. When Apollo granted Cassandra the power of clairvoyance, he did so hoping to win her love. However, after receiving the gift, Cassandra rejected Apollo's advances. Furious and humiliated, Apollo did not retract the gift but transformed it into a cruel curse. From that moment on, no one would ever believe her prophecies, regardless of how true they were. This curse is one of the most fascinating aspects of Cassandra's narrative, as it turned her gift into an unbearable burden. The prophecy, which was meant to be a channel of enlightenment and help, became a source of isolation, suffering, and despair. Cassandra and the Trojan War. Cassandra's tragedy became even more apparent during the events leading up to the Trojan War and its eventual destruction. Some of her most famous prophecies include: 1. The vision of Helen's abduction. Cassandra was one of the first to foresee that Paris's abduction of Helen would bring ruin to Troy. She begged Paris to abandon his journey to Sparta and return Helen to Menelaus, but no one paid attention to her words. 2. The arrival of the Greeks and the Trojan horse. During the siege of Troy, Cassandra had a vision of the Greeks' plan to hide warriors inside a large wooden horse, which would be brought within the walls as a gift. She begged the Trojans to burn the horse immediately, warning them that it was a deadly trap. Despite her insistence, the Trojans, swayed by Odysseus's cunning and their disbelief in Cassandra, ignored her warning. 3. The fall of Troy. Cassandra predicted the complete destruction of her city, including the death of her parents, the capture of her women and children, and the chaos that would follow. However, her visions, although accurate, were dismissed. Cassandra and the human condition. Cassandra's tragedy goes beyond the mythical events and reflects universal human issues. Her story symbolizes the isolation faced by those who, even when speaking the truth, are rejected or disbelieved by their society. In the historical and literary context, Cassandra represents the price of truth. In many cultures, those who bring difficult truths are seen with distrust or hostility. The figure of Cassandra illustrates how collective denial can lead to disaster, even in the face of clear warnings. The struggle against fate. Although Cassandra had the power to see the future, she was powerless to alter it. Her curse emphasizes the fatalism present in Greek mythology. Destiny cannot be avoided, even when its arrival is known. The injustice of the curse. The contrast between Cassandra's gift and curse makes her a deeply tragic figure. She is a woman who sees everything with clarity, but lives in a world deaf to her words. After the fall of Troy, Cassandra's suffering does not end. After the fall of Troy, Cassandra was captured by the Greeks and made a slave of Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae. During her capture, she was violated on the altar of Athena by Ajax the Lesser, an act that provoked the goddess's wrath and sealed the Greeks' fate on their journey home. Taken to Mycenae, Agamemnon made her his concubine. However, Cassandra had another terrible vision. She foresaw that both she and Agamemnon would be murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Aegisthus. Once again, her warnings were ignored. When the couple arrived in Mycenae, both were killed. confirming once more the inevitable fate Cassandra had prophesied. Cassandra in later culture Cassandra became a literary and philosophical symbol, representing the dilemma of those who possess deep knowledge or insight but are not heard. Her story inspired countless works in literature, theater, and visual arts. The term, Cassandra complex, is still used today to describe situations where someone predicts a disaster, but their warnings are disregarded. Conclusion: Cassandra as an eternal symbol. Cassandra's story is more than an individual tragedy, it is a mirror of the struggles faced by those who challenge the prevailing narratives and fight to be heard in a world resistant to truth. Her life, marked by a gift that became a curse, reminds us of the weight of knowledge and the isolation that often accompanies it. By exploring Cassandra, we are invited to reflect on our own relationship with truth, fate, and the voices we choose to hear, or ignore. 3. The tragic prophecy of Oedipus, the inevitable fate revealed by Apollo. The myth of Oedipus, immortalized in Sophocles' tragedy Oedipus Rex, is one of the most emblematic stories in Greek mythology about the power of fate and the human inability to escape their predestined path. At the heart of this story is Apollo, whose prophecy reveals Oedipus's fate and sets in motion the events that lead to his tragic downfall. The prophecy of the Oracle of Delphi. The story begins when King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes consult Apollo's oracle at Delphi. The god delivers a terrible prophecy: if they have a child, he will kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified by this revelation, Laius and Jocasta attempt to thwart fate by abandoning the newborn Oedipus on Mount Cithaeron. To ensure the child's death, Laius pierces his feet and leaves him exposed to the elements. However, fate had already begun its course. A shepherd finds the baby and, pitying the child, decides to deliver him to a childless couple in Corinth, King Polybus and Queen Merope, who raise Oedipus as their own. Oedipus's journey in the encounter with fate. As an adult, Oedipus, unaware of his true origins, hears rumors about his birth. Disturbed, he consults the oracle at Delphi to seek the truth. Apollo, however, does not respond directly to his question but delivers a terrible prophecy: he will kill his father and marry his mother. Desperate to avoid this fate, Oedipus decides to leave Corinth, believing that Polybus and Merope are his true parents. This decision marks the beginning of his journey toward tragedy. On his way, at a crossroads, Oedipus encounters a group of travelers. During a heated dispute over passage, he kills an older man without realizing that this man was his biological father, King Laius. Unknowingly, Oedipus has already fulfilled the first part of the prophecy. Oedipus's triumph and marriage to Jocasta. After this fateful encounter, Oedipus continues his journey and arrives in Thebes, a city plagued by a seemingly unsolvable problem. The Sphinx, a monstrous creature, terrorizes the region by challenging its citizens with a deadly riddle. What creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus solves the riddle with the answer: man, referring to the stages of human life: crawling in infancy, walking upright in adulthood, and using a cane in old age. By solving the riddle, Oedipus defeats the Sphinx, who then kills herself, freeing Thebes from her torment. In gratitude, the people of Thebes offer Oedipus the throne and the hand of Queen Jocasta, the widow of Laius. Unaware, Oedipus marries his own mother, fulfilling the second part of Apollo's prophecy. The discovery of the truth and the final tragedy. For many years, Oedipus reigns over Thebes as a wise and just ruler, but a plague strikes the city. To understand the cause of the disaster, Oedipus consults Apollo's oracle once again, which reveals that the plague is a result of moral contamination. The murderer of King Laius lives freely in Thebes. Determined to save his city, Oedipus begins an investigation that gradually uncovers the horrifying truth. First, he discovers that the man he killed at the crossroads was Laius, his biological father. Then, through the shepherd who had rescued him, Oedipus finally realizes that he was abandoned by Laius and Jocasta at birth and that he is now married to his own mother. Jocasta, upon realizing the truth, hangs herself in despair. Oedipus, consumed with guilt and horror, blinds himself with the pins from Jocasta's dress, declaring that he no longer deserves to see the light of day. He abdicates the throne and goes into exile, living as a beggar until the end of his days. The role of Apollo, revealer of fate. Although it may seem cruel, the role of Apollo in this myth is not that of a god who punishes, but of a mediator of fate. The prophecy he grants to Laius, Jocasta, and Oedipus is not a curse but a revelation of an inevitable future. In Greek mythology, fate is inescapable. Even the attempts of Laius, Jocasta, and Oedipus to avoid the prophecy ironically lead to its fulfillment. This fatalistic aspect is central to Greek thought, showing that the gods do not create fate but communicate and ensure it. The philosophical and human significance of the myth. The tragedy of Oedipus transcends the myth and has become a lasting symbol of the human condition. 1. The struggle against fate. The myth explores the tension between freedom and predestination, showing that, even with seemingly free choices, humans are subject to greater forces. 2. The search for truth. Oedipus is a character who relentlessly seeks the truth, even when it brings pain and destruction. His journey reflects the Greek ideal that knowledge is essential, even if it is devastating. 3. The consequences of hybris. Oedipus's pride in believing he can escape fate reflects the concept of hybris, arrogance, in Greek culture. This overconfidence is often punished by the gods. Conclusion. The myth of Oedipus as a universal reflection. The tragedy of Oedipus, guided by Apollo's prophecy, is a story of inevitability and revelation. By exposing the fragility of humans before the forces of fate, the myth continues to resonate deeply with philosophical and existential questions. In this context, Apollo is not just the god of light and prophecy, but an agent of self-knowledge, bringing forth truths that challenge both the individual and society. The myth of Oedipus, therefore, serves as both a warning and an invitation to reflect on the relationship between freedom, truth, and human responsibility. 4. The foundation of Sparta and the Dorians. Apollo's influence in creating a warrior society. The foundation of Sparta is deeply tied to the divine guidance provided by the Oracle of Delphi and the Dorian culture. The Dorians, known as the ancestors of the Spartans, were one of the Greek peoples who migrated to the Peloponnese during a period of major upheavals known as the Dorian invasion. They sought to establish new roots, and for this, they turned to the wisdom of the god Apollo through his oracle at Delphi, which played a central role in determining the principles that would shape Sparta into one of the most emblematic city-states in ancient Greece. The Dorians and their migration to the Peloponnese. The arrival of the Dorians in the Peloponnese is surrounded by myths and historical narratives that reflect both a migratory movement and a moment of cultural redefinition in Greece. According to tradition, the Dorians believed themselves to be direct descendants of Heracles, the Heraclids, the demigod hero, and claimed that their migration southward was a mission to restore the dominance of their lineage. During their journey, the Dorians faced doubts and challenges, and to overcome them, they consulted the Oracle of Delphi. Apollo, through the priestess Pythia, provided divine guidance, telling them to settle in the fertile lands of the Peloponnese, where they would form a society based on discipline, loyalty, and military strength. The foundation of Sparta. A society inspired by Apollo. Guided by Apollo's words, the Dorians established the city of Sparta in the region of Laconia, in the southeastern Peloponnese. From its foundation, Sparta was designed to reflect the values imparted by the god. The Spartans interpreted the prophecies as a recommendation to build a city-state whose social, political, and military structure was deeply disciplined and dedicated to collective excellence. Austerity and discipline. Apollo's message inspired the Spartans to develop a way of life characterized by simplicity and renunciation of luxuries. Discipline was not just a military practice, but a way of life that permeated every aspect of Spartan society. Military strength as a central pillar. Apollo's advice was interpreted as a necessity to build a city-state capable of defending its territory and expanding its influence through military strength. The Spartans established the agoge, a rigorous training system that prepared boys from childhood to become exceptional warriors. This Spartan education reflected the ideals of order and control, associated with the light of reason and harmony represented by Apollo. Devotion to Apollo. While Sparta was known for its militaristic culture, religion played a central role in its daily life. Apollo was one of the most revered gods by the Spartans, especially in the form of Apollo Karnios, a pastoral deity associated with social order and community cohesion. Festivals such as the Carnea celebrated the god and reinforced bonds among the citizens. The influence of Delphi in Spartan politics. Even after its foundation, Sparta continued to seek guidance from the Oracle of Delphi for its most important decisions. The oracle was frequently consulted during times of crisis or major political and military decisions. This connection between Sparta and Delphi underscored the intrinsic link between religion and governance in the Spartan polis. Legitimation of Lycurgus laws. Lycurgus, the legendary Spartan legislator often credited with the structure of Spartan society and politics, is said to have consulted the Oracle of Delphi before implementing his reforms. According to tradition, Apollo approved of his laws, which granted divine authority to the strict Spartan norms, including the military system, equality among citizens, and the prohibition of using gold and silver as currency. 1. Guidance in military conflicts. Sparta often turned to Delphi before going to war. The prophecies of Apollo were interpreted as divine strategies to ensure victory or as warnings about potential disasters. 2. Internal balance and order. Apollo was also seen as a symbol of balance and harmony, essential values for the cohesion of the rigid Spartan society. The belief in the gods will help maintain unity among the citizens and justified their austere and hierarchical practices. 3. Sparta, a reflection of Apollo's values under the influence of the Oracle of Delphi. Sparta became a symbol of strength and austerity, an example of a society that subordinated the individual to the collective. This Spartan way of life, inspired by Apollo's words, left a lasting impact on the Western imagination. The duality of Apollo, as the god of light and order, but also as the bearer of challenging truths, resonates in Sparta itself. Just as Apollo represented balance and precision, the Spartans sought to create a society that was both internally harmonious and relentless in its dealings with enemies. Conclusion: the legend of Sparta and its connection to Apollo. The foundation of Sparta and its development as a militaristic polis was not only a product of Dorian history and traditions but also of Apollo's profound spiritual influence. The guidance received at Delphi shaped Spartan identity, grounding it in principles of discipline, strength, and loyalty to divine values. Sparta stood out not only as a military power but as an example of how religion and belief in the gods could directly influence the social and political structure of a city-state. The myth of Sparta's foundation is, therefore, a testimony to how Apollo played a vital role not only in the individual fates of heroes but also in the formation of entire societies. We've reached the end of the first chapter of the trilogy on the 12 feats of Apollo. I hope you enjoyed this initial journey into the myth and grandeur of this fascinating god. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next videos and uncover the rest of this epic trilogy. And, of course, follow our band, Vale of Nyx, on music platforms for more mythological inspiration. See you next time, heroes.
Beneath the mountain shadow, the light begins to fade. Apollo speaks the secrets, in silence they are laid. 12 visions in his eyes, each one a story told, of fate and love, of death and gold. On Delphi's sacred ground, the whispers take their flight. The god of truth unveils the night. A dance of destiny, spinning through the air. The prophecy is written in the stars, it's there. On Delphi's sacred ground, the whispers take their flight. The god of truth unveils the night. A dance of destiny, spinning through the air. The prophecy is written stars, it's there. 12 prophecies, echoes in the sky. Words of the oracle, time passing by. A flame of warning, a shadow of truth. Apollo's light will guide the youth. The future trembles as he strums his lyre. Each note a spark igniting fire. The path to crossing fate's cruel game. His voice like thunder calling names. A hero's fall, a kingdom's rise. The answer lies beneath the skies. The sun will set, but it will shine again. Apollo's will remain, time will bend. 12 prophecies, echoes in the sky. Words of the oracle, time passing by. A flame of warning, a shadow of truth. Apollo's light will guide the youth. And when the world is silent and the sun is near its end, Apollo's prophecy will rise again. A truth eternal, a vision clear. The God of light will conquer fear. Follow! 12 prophecies, echoes in the sky. Words of the oracle, time passing by. A flame of warning, a shadow of truth. Apollo's light will guide the youth. 12 prophecies, shining so bright. Apollo's power will light the night.